Member for Fowler.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I also grew up in Housing Commission, Madam Deputy Speaker, and know too well the challenges of buying one's first home. I thank the member for Mayo for raising the issue of housing affordability. The Australian dream of buying a first home to start a family and raise your kids is now just that, a distant dream. Sydney is now considered one of the top 3 worst unaffordable cities in the world to own a home, according to an international study by Demographia. ABS study shows that Fowler, in particular, has the 4th worst housing affordability in Australia, after Blaxland, Watson and Reid. And this is before the upcoming interest rates rises foreshadowed by economists. Homes in Fowler have also hit the $1 million mark, where the median income is 20% less than the rest of Australia. One of my constituents, Simon Chow, came to our office, 27 years of age, employed and living with his parents. He was looking for a financially realistic option to buy a house. He wasn't optimistic that young people like him would ever own a home. I feel for young people like Simon. Many like him will be forced to rely on their parents as a guarantor just so they can enter the property market. The bank of mum and dad is now the standard and no longer an anomaly. Across New South Wales, the median house price is $1.1 million. I can't see how low-income families and young people can ever afford a $1 million home, let alone the deposit. Home ownership is falling fast for this group of Australians. And according to the Grattan Institute, as many members have mentioned today, home ownership rates among 25 to 34-year-olds fell from more than 60% to 40% between 1981 and 2021. And for low-income earners aged 45 to 54, home ownership has dropped from 71% to 53%. A recent report from the ANZ says it could take nearly 11.5 years for an average income household just to save the deposit for a $750,000 home. But housing affordability isn't just for those who have mortgages. It's also hitting the hip pockets of those who rent. According to ABS census data, 42% of my electorate of Fowler rent rather than own their own home, nearly 10% more than the national average. Fowler also has the 4th worst rental affordability in the country, where 46% of our rental households have rental repayments 30% more than their household income. With the cost of living crisis hitting the hip pockets of many Australians right now, how can people afford to save for a deposit while they pay rent, when they're struggling to simply put food on the table, pay for petrol and buy medication? How can hard-working families that are renting ever save enough to get off the rental cycle? But it doesn't have to be this way. There are measures both state and federal governments can take to ensure the next generation can afford to buy and live in their own homes. I look forward to seeing the federal government's plans for the upcoming budget, in particular to see how they will deliver on its promise to improve 30,000 new social and affordable housing properties for our most vulnerable, as well as for our frontline workers. While I'm a huge supporter of migration and the contribution they have and will provide our nation, I ask whether the government's plans to allow an intake of 190,000 migrants has in place measures to mitigate additional housing pressures on the migrants and first home buyers who will be competing for housing. Again, according to the Grattan Institute, building an extra 50,000 homes a year for a decade could leave Australian house prices 5 to 20% lower than what they could have been otherwise. With close to 200,000 migrants proposed to enter Australia each year, even the building of an extra 50,000 homes would only accommodate their needs for a roof over their head. Let's look at how countries like New Zealand and Canada tackle housing affordability. The former has banned non-residents from purchasing homes, and the latter are introducing new measures to implement a ban for 2 years. With some of these measures in place, it will be small but significant steps to helping low-income households and young people buy their own homes. Housing should not be a means where only wealthy residents benefit at the expense and at the cost of those that need a roof over their heads for their family. It should be a fundamental right for every Australian to be able to have a home. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Thank you. And I give the call to the